Hi, and welcome back to It's Not Rocket Science 5 Questions Over Coffee. I have with me, well, it's not coffee actually. At the moment, this is a tea, but I'm here with Dr. Anna Kallschmidt. Hello, Anna. Hope you're got a coffee or something with you to refresh you during this. Brilliant stuff. Anna is a psychologist. She works particularly with people who are neurodivergent, etc., talking about the unwritten rules of work. And I know you've got a book coming out soon, Anna, which I hope we can get into. So welcome to It's Not Rocket Science, 5 Questions Over Coffee. And I hope that you are going to be able to tell us about the very unwritten rules there are around work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I love the title of the podcast because I do think that internally a lot. This isn't rocket science. We don't need to we don't need to make it more complicated than it is.
No, we don't. No, we don't. And there is too much already of people trying to make things sound complicated. And I do say often, if it's too complicated for me to understand, it's already got too complicated, and you don't have to
Mm.
get too complicated for me to lose it. So, let's talk about you and your work. Let's talk about the sort of the people that you're trying to help. What's the what how would you characterize them? How do they, what is it that they notice about themselves, or are they business owners that need the help for their employees?
Yeah, so since I look at the unwritten rules of work, which are the cultural norms that are so ingrained in your organization that people don't think they need to be transparent about what they are. So it's really
Mm,
about there's a cultural problem, which impacts so many things. So I'm going to tell you the signs that my clients notice when they come to me, but at the core of them is being not in denial. That's my ideal
okay.
client, someone who's not in denial, someone who's recognized that there's an issue and
And,
wants
and
to move forward.
and for those of
Wants.
us who aren't yet even aware of the problem, what's the problem? What are the things they're noticing, so that
So this they
maybe there are
could.
people out there that haven't even yet got to that stage?
So it can be low employee engagement is always one. Very poor retention. You're having
Yeah.
problems promoting. You have like great employees? This is a big one I see. You have great employees from like entry level to like almost middle management, but once they get into like the higher corporate levels, it's like they fall apart or they just don't get it. So I see this a lot specifically in industries that have like a blue collar, white collar, two different subsets, so like retail or anything in manufacturing, etc., of where you have like these excellent blue collar workers, you promote them up to the corporate side, and they're like, "What is going on?" Because he introduced me as neurodivergent, which is true, but originally my work is about class, and there's a class culture clash there. And so it's when you have a really good performer who, as they get higher, they run into more problems. And when you see this, so you have promotion pipeline issues, you have retention issues, you might have productivity issues, and you might have complaints about your management at the management level after you've promoted them, and you're not sure why because they were always great performers and you know they work really hard.
So tell me, the people that you're talking about there, the managers, the business owners, the founders of those companies. What are the things they've done? They've gone through they've gone through the usual
Mm-hmm.
training. They've tried to sort of train their managers in better communication, all that sort of thing. What do they
Mm-hmm.
normally find that they haven't done, that they haven't understood what their problem is?
A lot of us, and this is normal human nature, a lot of us have a hard time conceptualizing that our normal isn't everyone's normal. And it's
Yeah.
one of those that sounds simple, that's not rocket science, but that's so deeply ingrained that a lot of companies spend a lot of money trying to add more things to solve the problem. Have this training, have that uh, speaker come in, etc. But they don't look at what the core issues are, and it's just assumed that it's just professionalism, and that people get bristled when you say that because they're like, well, that's just being respectful. That's not all that professionalism is, right? It's very easy to dismiss and be like, this is just how things are done. This is just white collar work. This is just professionalism. But it's things like indirect communication. It's things like they don't know how to schmooze enough. They're rubbing people wrong. They seem rough around the edges. Or that they either don't know how to be assertive enough or they come across as aggressive. And it's those little nuances that are more common in blue collar and pink collar work, of being more direct in your communication, of talking more about task and less about interpersonal skills. And then it changes when it gets to the corporate level. And
Mm,
so bringing in somebody to talk about unconscious bias can be great for other reasons, but it's not going to solve those culture clashes.
okay. Okay. So you must have some great advice that you can give to people to take them into that first step. And I know we're going to get into some of the stuff that you offer us in terms of sort of if you go to the vault that we have here, which is the systemize.me free hyphen stuff vault. We've got stuff from Anna which you can sort of grab. But talk us through sort of what is the advice that you give to companies when they first come to you, the sort of thing that you're telling them they need to start this process before they get an expert like you involved.
hmm So I will do an unwritten rules audit for where I look at I have 8 groups of unwritten rules, and I can survey that and tell you which ones you're struggling with. But I have a very quick free version on my website, drkallschmidt.com/quiz. And it's about 4 questions once you tell me if you're looking for yourself, your organization. And that'll let me know which one you're struggling with the most. Are you struggling with people don't tell you about problems until it's too late? Are you struggling with people, there's a lot of miscommunications and it's delaying productivity? Are you struggling with you have a team of really top performers, but they do not know how to work together? And that helps me narrow down which culture clash might be an issue, and then I can make recommendations for your organization. So
Brilliant.
that is the quickest free option. But I do have, like I said, a book coming out in the next couple of weeks, and that has every chapter covers an unwritten rule. And at the end of every chapter, I give recommendations for leaders, staff, and HR. And those are very practical, hands-on. I don't do the vague advice thing. If you haven't noticed, I'm like the first thing I said was like, well, you have to not be in denial, right? So it's a very, it's a very. I've been told I'm not a B12 shot speaker. I'm not going to make you feel great and then walk away and you're like, what are we doing? So it's very, the book is over 300 pages for a reason. It's very tangible, hands-on.
And that's a really good recommendation for anybody who's here at the moment for actual practical advice. And that's the stuff we love to give on this podcast, because I don't know about you, and comment in below if you're beginning to see things in what you're being told now. Are you seeing things in your work where you're going, I think I've got one of these? And I know Anna or myself will come back to you and sort of direct you in the right direction to start getting that help, because we all need to start being direct with people. We need to start getting that sort of action that Anna's talking about now. We need to be able to move things forward. So yeah, do comment below on things that you might have seen in your workplace, and let us know whether or not this is resonating. Anna, you were saying you were direct. How did you come to be this expert in these unwritten rules, the things that we don't see? How did you manage to sort of find them, and how did you find and work them out?
Well, I like to do, well, the short answer is I screwed up enough that I had to figure it out. I pissed off
Okay,
enough
yeah,
people
I
that
can
I was
see
like,
that.
maybe
I
I
can
need
see
to do a
that.
deep dive on this. But I'd say the moment that it started coming together for me was in my first week in my PhD program. We have this class, Introduction to Industrial Psychology, where we're going over, I'm the type of psychologist, nobody knows who we are. So we're going over like, job performance, how to design metrics, how to design jobs, how to do a job analysis, all of those tangible things. And we learned first week there are 2 types of job performance. Does that sound right to you that there are 2 types?
No, that's not
See,
something I've heard
it
before.
fascinated me as well. And so the first type is task performance, which is what is in your job description. And the other kind is contextual performance. And it was all of those other things that help organizations, but that aren't written down. And I was like, so what are all of those other things? And the room just went silent. And everybody was like, well, I was like, no,
No, I wouldn't have
I
asked the
don't.
question if I knew.
And I was coming in, I didn't go straight from undergrad to grad. I worked since high school and I worked in between grad and under. So like I had work experience and I was like, what is this? And I was already doing a research. My master's thesis was on, is a low income background stigmatized at work, even after you've experienced social class mobility, and even for white men in America? And so I was already in that vein of looking at class. And so when nobody could tell me what all those other things were, and IO psychology is so big on measurement. Like we're so big on what gets measured, matters and drives performance. So it was just weird to me that there was this whole second piece of performance that we weren't being really clear about. And so that's what I ended up doing my dissertation on, was what are the unwritten rules of work for people who move up from a low income background to middle class or higher through employment. And so I interviewed 64 people and noticed themes in what they were saying. I talked to Black and white women and men in the United States. And then over time, my next study, I made a scale and I administered it to all races and genders in the US, and I looked at statistically significant differences. And so it's just kind of evolved from that moment of being like,
Okay.
what's all that other stuff?
And so is that effectively the book? Is that what you've now put into the book so that you can really, well, at this stage, categorize what those unwritten rules are, so that now there is an answer to the question, what are the unwritten rules?
Yeah, that's the book. So I did the dissertation and I didn't plan on becoming like the unwritten rules coach, but I have largely been outside of academia. Like I've done, I've kept a research hold and I sometimes teach, but largely I've worked for the federal government or private consulting firms and worked in organizations. And everywhere I worked, the unwritten rules were a problem. Like no matter what, if you go in and you're trying to implement a change and nobody knows what you're talking about or they don't know how to talk to each other, it's not going to work. And so it just kept on becoming this pattern of noticing that it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone, right? We're not addressing the broken bone. And so, I just kept researching it. And then in the book, I spend a chapter on the research on each of them. I talk about my personal experiences with organizations, and I also talk about case studies of where we can see these rules play out in other organizations as well.
That's fascinating. And, I mean, that strikes me that it's not just small business owners who are currently struggling with their teams, which are perhaps not quite as functioning as the way they would like them to be, who are listening to this and thinking that might be me, but it's those organizations that are trying to undergo big change. And I've been involved with those. And you are absolutely right that when you try and make a change, even if it is for the better, nobody wants to adopt that change. And it's largely down to a bunch of things that you cannot tangibly put your finger on and go, we need to address this. And it's those unwritten rules which actually prevent and cause those transformations to often go very badly wrong, become very expensive and be very expensive to fix. So this is a book for a large number of people. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. AI is actually making the problem almost worse.
Yeah, because AI amplifies and automates the good and the bad. And I'm sure you've heard of the MIT study that came out a few months ago that was like 95% of AI actually isn't increasing profits at all. Did you see that?
I did.
Okay, so what I found interesting, so one of my unwritten rules is the unwritten rule of compliance, which is that people might ask you for your opinion, but they're not really asking for your opinion, right? You're supposed to just agree. And one of the examples that the MIT report gave was that there was this huge flop, and of course they don't name the organization, that one person, one leader, made this global rollout, just him and AI. No feedback, nobody else looked at it, and guess what? It didn't go well. Isn't that shocking? And that, to me, that's an example of you automated the unwritten rule of compliance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because AI is only going to disagree with you if you tell it to. Otherwise, it's like, yeah, you go, girl. You are so smart. Like, hello, right? And it's like you have to tell it, don't hallucinate. What are the holes here? And even then, you still have to think for yourself. So to me, that was an example of I wasn't even looking for it. I was just reading the report. I found it interesting because I'm not anti-AI. I'm just anti being stupid with AI. And I saw that example and I was like, well, there you go. There's an unwritten rule on automation.
I must admit that that's one I shall now start to quote more often. I do often get involved in companies that are trying to improve productivity with AI. And the one thing that I often say about automation, and I did automation for a number of years. I built a couple of companies around automation. And the one thing that I was always taught and always said to customers as they started their automation project, please let's start by sorting out the problems, because otherwise your automation will just make your bad stuff flow faster, and you
Amen.
cannot then control it. If your bad process is now fast, you don't even understand where the bad stuff's coming from, because it will come at you so quickly. Too many companies, I
Mm-hmm.
don't believe, are looking at these sort of unwritten rules, looking at the underlying problems first, resolving those, so they've got a foundation for growth and a foundation for building those glorious temples of scaled companies.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to try and keep you here all afternoon. I'm sure we could have a very, very long conversation, and it would be great fun. But people want to get to the nub of things, and one of those things that I think is really important is there must be a question at the moment that you're thinking, he hasn't asked me the killer question, the one question that will really break this topic open. So I'm going to ask you to tell me what that question is, because I obviously don't know it and I haven't asked it, but then you're obviously going to have to answer it for me, because that is the key to getting this topic embedded in everybody's workplace.
I have not. That's the only one question you sent me that I could not answer. But what it reminded me of is that an exercise that I do with some of my clients is I'll ask them to picture their ideal employee. And I'll ask them, what are they
What a
doing?
good question for them.
I'll ask them, what are they doing? Okay, what does this look like? And it's a helpful, because you should already be doing this, because why are you measuring job performance if you can't tell me this, right? So we're having this conversation. They'll be like, this person is a great communicator, this person is a great team player, this person, tries to solve problems first, and then they come to me, da 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 da. And then at the end, I ask them, and what background did you assign that person? Because inherently, what race did you assign that person? What gender did you assign that person? How old were they? There's all these things that we don't realize color who we foresee. And it's both important to know who your ideal employee is so that you can make sure you're measuring job performance that is needed. And it's important to also recognize the noise, because too often we all do this. We all, like, I think white women with a Southern American accent sound brilliant, right? But that's because they sound like me. And so, like, we all do that. And so it's important to recognize that we all have noise. And that is a really critical takeaway in my book. Is one of the main recommendations is we all need to have frame of reference training. And that's going to be the next rollout in my workshops that I do in my online school community, is focusing on how do we narrow down the noise, because it may make us feel good short term, but then we run into all those problems that we talked about in the beginning of, why are the people I'm promoting not meeting expectations? Why do we have low engagement? Why am I spending so much in turnover? What's going on? Why is my AI not working? Right? All of these things.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Anna, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us. What you say is so critical to people who are trying to grow their businesses, who are trying to sort of get work done more profitably, get it done productively. They're often ignoring, they've got the task, they're ignoring the other stuff. And that's the thing that often slows you down. So I think you've got a great way of putting it. I love the way you're putting it. I really hope that if anybody here is thinking, I know that's me, please drop comments down in the chat below. We will get back to you. We will point you in the right direction, because I think this is a great way of doing it. The other thing I'm going to ask you all to do now is please go to this link, which is www.systemize.me/subscribe. That's systemize.me/subscribe. It's a simple form. It just asks you for your name and an email address. You will then get onto the website, the mailing lists. Apologies, the mailing list for this show. You'll get an email once a week from me telling you who's coming up. and you can come and look on LinkedIn and join the call so that you can get your questions answered. But in the meantime, Dr. Anna Kallschmidt, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us. Really appreciate you coming and explaining some of those unwritten rules. I'm now going to have an unwritten rule, which is I need to have a drink immediately after this. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing more of what you are producing as you do the second version of all of this.
All right, thank you so much. Have a good one.